I'm starting to get some feeling back. Ow.
You know Avatar has that beach episode?
Party's over.
It's kind of filler. This video is that for my channel. Like, it's filler, but in the best way possible. Flexibility, core, explosive, balance. So before we get into explosive training in book 3, we kind of have to explain what happens to every single person along their fitness journey at some point: injury. So this is very timely for me because recently, less than a week ago, I injured my lower back deadlifting. Y'all can roast me in the comments, but it's whatever. In the last episode, we briefly touched on how an injury and how failure can help you along your journey, but specifically in this video, we're going to explain what it means to have an injury while working out and how experts suggest recovering and healing from an injury. Not gonna lie, actually the first half of book 3 does a phenomenal job of demonstrating Aang's physical healing journey in a sense and how that's, applicable in the real world, but also psychological healing as well. What makes healing possible? We'll focus on 3 things in this video. Number 1, elimination or reduction of pain. 2, physical rehabilitation. And 3, psychological trust. So first off, what's an injury? An injury is damage to the body typically caused by an external force or event. This happened to Aang when like 300 million volts of electricity was sent through his soul. In the real world, or of course in the gym, a workout injury is damage to the musculoskeletal system, bones, muscles, ligaments, tendons, and cartilage that occur during physical activity, including exercise and sports. These injuries can range from minor to severe and can result from various factors such as improper form, overexertion, inadequate warm-up, or overuse. Regardless of how it happens, what do you do to recover from an injury? So the part 1, as I mentioned, reducing pain. Expert consensus strongly emphasizes early pain management to support healing and prevent chronic dysfunction.
I'll handle this. The Avatar is back. Ugh.
According to the Mayo Clinic, the first goal in treating a sports injury is to reduce pain and inflammation, typically using RICE, rest, ice compression, elevation, anti-inflammatories when appropriate. Pain isn't just a symptom, it's a signal. Ignoring or pushing through it can worsen the injury or delay recovery.
You're still hurt.
And while ice is generally preferred for acute inflammation, there's also heat therapy like using a heating pad, and it can be useful after initial swelling subsides, especially for muscle tightness or if you have like a stiff back, which I'm using a lot lately. And offloading the area via crutches, braces, or reduced activity is also critical to avoid further damage while allowing the body to initiate repair. We kind of see this like literally in the first episode. Aang has to use his staff for support. He needs physical support, but he also needs social support, which we'll get to later on. And if you notice, I think the creators did a wonderful job in the first half of book 3, having Aang do less physical fighting and bending. Aang's doing reduced activity, and Aang isn't doing a whole lot of heavy lifting like he was in books 1 and 2. Not only is he just cut off from the Avatar state, but I also think the creators intentionally gave characters like Sokka, Katara, Toph, even Zuko a bit more screen time to demonstrate the physical limitations of Aang kind of sitting in the background for a little bit. However, let's say you do the first part, you listen to your doctors, which is something I really don't do. I'm working on it. But you listen to your doctors, you stay off of it, you use the RICE method. What's the next part of recovery and healing? Part 2, rehab. Physical rehabilitation, often referred to as physical therapy, is a healthcare discipline focused on restoring and enhancing physical function and mobility in individuals recovering from injuries, surgeries, or medical conditions. Not only was Aang physically healed throughout the show after initially getting struck by lightning and his life was saved, but he also needed additional healing afterwards from Katara, as we see in episode 1. Rehab involves graded exposure, starting with gentle mobility work, progressing to neuromuscular activation, and then strength and functional exercises. And in the same weird way, Aang, he literally goes from small but progressive steps to getting his activity and his strength back. He goes from overextending himself in episode 1, which is something I'm guilty of, but gradually he goes from walking to dancing. He stays in stealth mode and he stays pretty much on the defensive for the following episodes. Of course, he can still bend, and there are times when he's prepared to fight, and of course, keeping his identity as the Avatar is a secret.
I think I'm a little old to be fighting the Avatar.
How did you know?
Oh, I've been around a while. You pick things up.
I think this was cleverly done, having him in the background, because it shows how he has to trust his body again and how he has to trust his friends and how he has to look for support as well. getting ahead of myself, but we'll get to that eventually. However, this quote explains what helped Aang. It's not about fixing the issue, it's about restoring the person's capacity to move with confidence and control. And that takes us nicely to part 3. So while physical therapy can literally take somebody who is in a wheelchair and turn them into a long distance endurance athlete, it's not just about physical rehab, it's also psychological. If you've watched my self-sabotage video about Korra, basically I talk about how we can have limiting beliefs, lack of confidence, and ultimately work against ourselves. Healing is just as much psychological as it is physical. So there's such thing as a fear of re-injury called kinesiophobia, one of the biggest barriers to full recovery. According to a study of the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy, patients with high fear avoidance beliefs take longer to return to activity and may experience more pain even when physically recovered. Sports psychologist Dr. Tim Taylor explains, when athletes don't trust their bodies, it affects how they move, increases hesitation, and ironically raises injury risk. There's a belief that any type of pain or really any type of discomfort is bad. And if you've had an injury somewhere in your body, you should avoid that area. You shouldn't exercise it because you don't want it to get worse and you don't want to re-injure yourself. This is partially true during the initial injury and during the initial accident. However, this kind of ends up being a half-truth because you'll fall victim of something called
the nocebo effect, and it's similar to the placebo effect, where you become more fragile and more vulnerable to pain.
Cliff Notes version is negative expectations can trigger a cascade of physiological and psychological responses that manifest as unpleasant symptoms. Building psychological safety through graded exposure, small wins, and supportive coaching or physical therapy and psychological therapy helps restore trust and resilience. And this was kind of how Aang more or less learns to heal in a physical sense and in a psychological sense, because he does feel the weight of his failures and the past mistakes just weighing on his conscience and feeling like when the world needed him, he let it down. But he also realizes, as much as he hates the support of his friends,
And I hate the invasion plan too. I don't want you or anyone else risking your lives to fix my mistakes.
he also really needs it in order to be successful and to heal properly. Let's talk about the first thing he did, which fans have been like dying for him to do, arguably since the Cave of Two Lovers in book 2. So first off, he finally sought a romantic connection, which helped him through Katara, who helped him both physically heal, but also psychologically as well.
What? I'm saying I would rather kiss you than die. That's a compliment.
Well, I'm not sure which I would rather do.
He also learned to rely on mentors to help him overcome his past mistakes. He also learned from enemies that turned into allies such as Zuko.
Zuko here.
He learned from fire people, he learned from the lion turtle, and ultimately he gained confidence from the very thing that he was afraid of, getting whipped by Ozai like the Jacksons. Anyways, but when he was slammed against that rock, impacting his lightning wound, the impact released the blocked energy, allowing him to access the Avatar state again. This allowed him to whip Ozai like Kendrick whipped Drake. So, plus he was able to keep his identity, which we'll talk about later on in the next video. So pretty much it. That's how book 3 shows Aang healing in a physical sense, a psychological sense, and how we can apply those principles in the real world. And the real world for us is important to seek support not only through a physical therapist, but through close friends, loved ones, and also realizing that just because we have an injury, we can learn to trust our body again. And just because we injured ourselves once doesn't mean we're bound to injure ourselves again. And it doesn't mean that we're bound to never lift again. People have gone through the worst injuries, like horrifying injuries, and they've still been able to work out again as long as they follow the proper steps that go with rehab and healing. So this was a lot of fun. This is just all filler till we get to book 3, which I'm looking forward to. I happen to love the filler episodes in Avatar, so Ember Island Players, Tales of Boston, say any type of filler that's like interesting or fascinating. But for me, that's pretty much it. As I say for all these videos, remember this is just a personal trainer geeking out over a fandom. Take everything I say as a gram of protein. Remember to stay mentally fit, emotionally fit, physically fit, and I will see you all in the next video.